All right, welcome everyone to the second research seminar of this summer 25 series. Very happy to introduce someone you all know, Joachim Neu, our colleague here at a16z Crypto, where he's a research associate. Today he's going to answer a bunch of confusing questions, like why do some people say that you can do synchronous consensus with 99% adversary, whereas some say you can't do it with 51%. Also, like, what is a client actually, really? So, Joachim.
Thank you. Great to be here and great to give this talk. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for spoilering the talk. So I'm going to be talking about this recent paper of ours, which we presented a few weeks ago at Financial Crypto. This is joint work with my former colleagues at Stanford, Srivatsan, Nusret, and Dionysus, and our advisor, David. So I'm gonna, zoom all the way out and remind you what we're all here to do, right? We want to build blockchains. Why? Because we want to decentralize certain applications. Think, for example, voting applications, maybe monetary applications, maybe just replicating a database, right? And the approach we take to this is this idea of a magic computer in the sky that we want to build, right? It's sort of a computer that arises out of a simulation or an emulation by a bunch of participants that sort of run a distributed protocol. And then from that comes out this magic computer in the sky. And the magic computer in the sky is great because everybody can read its state and everybody can provide input to that computer, and nobody can stop or corrupt the execution of that computer. Right? And then within that computer, we run our application logic, and that's how we sort of decentralize these applications. How exactly do we do that? Typically, that problem sort of decomposes into two steps, right? The first one is there are inputs to these applications, and we somehow need to agree in which order we're going to execute on these inputs. And then we're going to have a deterministic state machine that sort of describes the logic of our application. And once we've all reached agreement on in what order we're going to process transactions, then since it's a deterministic state machine, we'll all see sort of the same state transitions of that state machine. So that gets us to state machine replication consensus, and that's what this is about. Right? And so the question then is, okay, we want to build these state machine replication consensus protocols. Up to what fraction of adversary participants, I call them validators here, does the protocol remain secure? Right? Seems a simple question, and if you go and try and Google this question, you'll get a bunch of different answers for different protocols. Right? You may hear that PBFT-style protocols, such as Hot Stuff or Ethereum's Casper FFG, are secure up to 33% adversaries. You may hear that there are other protocols like these more kind of blockchain native kind of Nakamoto-style consensus protocols, longest chain protocols like Bitcoin or Ouroboros, or also synchronous BFT protocols like Sync Hot Stuff. They're secure up to 49% adversaries, right? And then if you look in other corners, you may find people saying, oh, we have this, these great consensus protocols over here that allow us 99% security. So which of these numbers is correct, right? Is there somehow, there must be like, if we have protocols that work for 99%, why would we operate in 33%, right? Or if we have 99%, why would we operate a protocol that is 49%, right? And so if you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find, okay, the difference between the first two columns here is easily explained, right? The first protocols assume a partially synchronous network, meaning the network may be, have a hiccup sometimes and have very high network latency. And the first category of protocols remain secure even in that setting, whereas the second category of protocols require synchrony. So first category is sort of out, right? But then even for the third column here, you'll find that the assumption they state is all we need is synchrony, right? So on the one hand, we have this blog post, for example, from Vitalik, but there's also other recent works, even in S&P, for example, that describe these sort of blockchain protocols under malicious majority, right? And on the other hand, this I took from one of Link's papers. There is, impossibility proofs saying actually, you can't operate beyond sort of an honest majority, right? So what's going on, right? How do we clarify this? Yeah.
So I assume the reference 1 and 2 did not claim their protocol is SMR, right? They may say consensus or other things.
Correct. Yeah. That's where we're gonna go. Yes. Okay. So in order to understand, there's a good comment, and that's what the next slide is about, right? So we need to dig a little bit deeper into what do we mean when we say consensus, right? And so we think of a blockchain. I've teasered that a little bit on the first slide, but let's be a bit more formal sort of about the setup of the kind of ordering protocol that we're trying to build, right? We have transactions. These are inputs to our chain. And then we have a set of validators, right? And in the first sort of naive setup, you may want to write down, you say, okay, we want to build an ordering protocol where transactions are input to these validators. The validators talk to each other, they run the protocol, and then at some point they output logs, right? They output an ordering of these input transactions, okay? So what do we assume about the validators? We assume that basically all the validators kind of know each other, right? There's public key infrastructure for them. And some of the validators can be malicious, right? But overall, we have some sort of a threshold honesty assumption, right? Maybe it's 99%, maybe it's 49%, maybe it's 33%, but that's sort of the general setup, right? But actually, this flavor of consensus is not state machine replication consensus, right? This is what we would call atomic or total order broadcast, right? And that's not what we're after. Blockchains work differently. Namely how? Well, there's a crucial entity sort of in the system that are clients, right? That are participants who are part of the protocol, but they're not part of sort of running the backbone of the consensus protocol, but rather they're interested in learning the protocol's output, right? Think of merchants, wallets, block explorers, all the sort of endpoints that in the end will output this log. Okay, so really there's another category sort of entity, namely clients, and it's actually the clients who are outputting these logs. Okay, so and the thing about the clients is we have no public key infrastructure on them, meaning we don't know how many there are, we don't know who they are, they cannot sign messages, right? And some of them may also be malicious, but in particular, we don't have any sort of threshold honesty assumption, right? For all we know, maybe that all the clients are malicious, or most of them. Okay, so that's our setup. That is what I call state machine replication consensus. Okay, and the question that we open up on the first slide, or in the second slide about this, the question of the resilience, right, becomes clear and becomes explainable once we look at what assumption. The question now is, what assumptions do we make about these clients, right? We've discussed very early on that there could be synchronous networks, there could be partially synchronous networks. That's usually about the communication among the validators. But what about the communication between the validators and the clients? What about the communication among the clients? What about, for example, some of you will have seen the sleepy protocols, right? Where validators can go to sleep. What if clients can go to sleep? Okay, and it turns out that these modeling differences sort of explain the differences that we've seen before, and that's what the talk is about. Okay, so concretely, this 49% result that we've seen early on, right, assumes that clients are sleepy and silent. In contrast, this 99% result that we have seen basically assumed that clients are always on and communicating. What does that mean? By sleepy clients, I mean there could be clients that basically are not they're not following the blockchain at every point in time. Okay, sometimes maybe they only wake up like 3 years after the project has already been started, or maybe they go to sleep for a few hours every now and then because they take a flight and it's on a phone, or merchants may not be following the chain when they're not actually expecting a payment or something like that, right? In contrast, always-on clients are ones that they're always following the chain. Okay. What are silent clients? Silent clients are clients that can only receive information from the validators, but they cannot themselves send information. And what I mean by send information, in particular, it's sort of a one-way street, right? The clients, for example, they get presented with sort of evidence based on which they should confirm a certain transaction, but they don't have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to broadcast that information and I'm going to sort of relay it to everybody else to make sure that everybody else who may at the same time be asked to confirm something also sees this bit of information. That is different in communicating clients, right? Where the assumption is that a client, whenever they see a message, they can sort of relay it, and shortly thereafter, pretty much all other clients that are online right now or that are awake right now can also see that information.
So does communicating sort of imply a PKI for the clients, or?
Good question. No, so the idea here is not that we have a PKI on the client. The idea is whether or not clients can forward messages, basically.
I see.
Okay,
so if I get a message from a client, I'm basically I'm going to ignore it, except in as much as validators have signed that message.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to say, oh, I got this message from this client over there. But the mechanism is basically the clients are part of the gossip network, and if you present evidence to a client, prompting them to confirm something, then they can sort of relay it. And if the network happens to be synchronous, then all other clients will soon also see that information. And then maybe they know that there exists some evidence to confirm something, and maybe that stops them from confirming something else. We'll see that mechanism in one of the protocols. Okay. Now, once we basically go to that, to this level, right, and we say, okay, let's model the clients, right, along these two dimensions, right, the sleepiness and the communication capabilities of the clients, right, it's natural to ask, okay, clearly this setting is a harder setting than this setting, right? Now it's natural to ask, wait, what about the sort of intermediary client models, right? What happens when we have always on but silent clients? What happens if we have sleepy but communicating clients? And so the sort of first non-trivial result we get from this paper is that indeed, if you have always on and silent clients or sleepy and communicating clients, you can't improve over this 49% resilience in terms of total resilience. Now we want to sort of dig a little bit deeper still. So I need to introduce one more kind of detail of the model, right? So let's remind ourselves what are the consensus properties, the security properties that we want from these ordering protocols, right? From these consensus protocols. Consensus security are these two properties, right? Safety, which is that all clients confirm transactions in the same order. Think of it as bad things don't happen, where bad things are inconsistency. And liveness, which is that for every sort of input transaction, eventually the clients confirm that transaction. And think of that as good things should happen in your protocol. And then we talked earlier about this question of the resilience of a protocol, right? The resilience of the protocol is the maximum fraction T of adversary validators, such that these two properties are guaranteed by the protocol. Okay. Now we can split sort of the resilience up, right? So far we have one parameter. So we're going to separate this in a safety resilience and a liveness resilience. And we're going to change this up here, right? We're going to say, okay, safety should hold whenever the adversary, oh, there's a typo there, whenever the adversary is less than the safety resilience, and liveness should hold whenever the adversary is less than the liveness resilience. Okay, now we get a sort of a 2D kind of region, and we can ask, okay, what pairs of safety and liveness resiliences are achievable in each of these client models? And now if we go back to this characterization of the resiliences, we see that actually once we do this decomposition, something interesting happens, right? Previously, we were looking sort of at the sort of maximum value, maximum achievable point on this diagonal, right? And that's 45, 45, sorry, that's 49, 49, and 49, and 99 here. Right? But once we do this decoupling in safety and liveness resilience, we see that actually the region for sleepy and communicating clients is bigger than for sleepy and silent clients. Okay.
Sorry, question. This is like corruptions of the validator set. What
Yes.
do you assume about corruptions of the clients?
The clients, there's no assumption there. There can be arbitrary corruption on the clients. The properties hold for honest clients.
Got it.
Okay?
So, sorry, one.
Yep.
Because they're in a gossip network, you assume that if at least one honest client broadcasts anything good, all honest clients will receive it.
Yes. If one honest client rebroadcasts something, for example, in the communicating clients model, then it means that under the assumption we also have synchrony, shortly thereafter, all the honest clients will have received that information.
Do you also need all the validators to receive what the client sent?
Not in the protocols that I have here. The assumption in general is that they're sort of on a joint kind of gossip network where the property is if any one honest party sends something, then shortly thereafter, all honest parties get that information.
So your bounds took that into account?
Yes. Yes, yeah. Okay, good. So, right, this is the operating point that we've seen earlier, right, of the Nakamoto protocols and the synchronous BFT protocols. And this is the 99% that we've seen for Dolev Strong earlier. Now there's something interesting, right, which is that in the setting of sleepy and communicating clients, for example, and we're going to zoom into that in a bit, we have a new protocol which allows us to get consensus where we're always safe, right, up to 99%, up to 100% adversary, well, up to 99% validators were safe, right? And we're live if a majority of validators is honest. And another protocol where we can achieve that we're always live and we're safe if the majority of validators is honest. And then in the always on silent setting, we get the same behavior as for sleepy silent clients. Because of this implication, it's kind of clear that whatever we can achieve here, right, we can run the same protocol in a sort of a better model, an easier model, right, and we would still be able to achieve the same sort of blue region. This blue region is a subset of this blue region. Okay, good. So I want to zoom now into these two protocols here, okay, because these are, as far as we know, these are new. So we'll want to talk about an always safe protocol for sleepy and communicating clients under synchrony. How do we get that? So our goal is to build a protocol. Remember, a protocol is this kind of ordering box, right? There's transactions coming in, there is logs coming out, right? And we want this protocol to be safe up to 99% adversary, and we want it to be live up to 49% adversary. Here's how we're going to do it. We start from any certifiable SMR protocol, say think hot stuff. Any certifiable SMR protocol that works in this 49% setting. Okay, we're going to give the protocol a shot at ordering transactions, and we're going to output the confirmed logs together with these certificates of confirmation. We're going to gossip them. Then we're going to wait some time, right? The time that it takes for messages here to propagate. And then if we haven't heard any conflicting confirmations from that first protocol in the meantime, then we're going to assume that it's now safe to go forward and output the log that we just got from this protocol. The mechanism clear, right? So we're going to run a 49% protocol. It's going to give us output logs together with a bunch of signatures from the validator saying, look, this is what you should confirm. We're going to broadcast that, we're going to gossip that to everybody. The clients, yes. This is, in some sense, this is what happens on the client side, yeah. Okay, then you're going to gossip that, and then whenever you get something, you're going to gossip it, and then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to hold on and basically see if the network has seen anything conflicting. Okay, I'm going to give the network some time to see if there was anything conflicting. If I don't hear anything conflicting within delta time, and the assumption is that within delta time messages propagate between honest nodes, then I'm going to output that log that I just got. Right. So why is that live? Well, okay, we make the assumption that the adversary is 49%, right? Then this protocol is live. We're going to gossip whatever comes out of it, fine. We're going to wait a little bit. That's also fine. Now, the only thing that could stop us from outputting this and jeopardize our liveness if there is some conflicting confirmation that we receive, right? But we can't have a conflicting confirmation because under the assumption that the adversary is 49%, this protocol is also safe. So there cannot be conflicting outputs. So eventually we're going to output this and everything's fine. What about the safety side? Suppose there is a client, an honest client that outputs a log. Then that client has gossiped that log at least delta time before. So by this point in time, right? Then that log together with that certification has now been received by all other honest clients, right? When could another honest client possibly output anything conflicting? Right? If it outputs something before our client outputs, right, then it would have gossiped it even before here. So our client would have received it and would not output anything conflicting. And another client can also not output after this, right, for basically the symmetric argument, right? Our client has gossiped the certification of that log a while ago, and that would have propagated to any other client, any other honest client, and would have stopped it from outputting anything conflicting.
If there is indeed a conflict, what do I do?
You stop.
Stop forever.
If there is a conflicting output from here, right, it means that the adversary must be greater than 50%. So you don't have to provide liveness anymore, so you just stop outputting. Yeah. So that's the safety proof, right? And interestingly, there seems to be a somewhat similar mechanism going on in Cosmos. So Srivatsan and David and Dionysus talked a bunch to Cosmos people and asked them, hey, what happens in your protocol if there is a majority dishonest or more than 33% dishonest? And they say, no, there can never be inconsistent confirmations sort of on one client because our software basically says whenever you see something conflicting, you just stop outputting entirely, basically. And so every one client is sort of consistent, and they do this kind of rebroadcasting trick. The only thing they don't do is waiting here. But it's kind of interesting.
So Cosmos clients by default are communicating.
Say again?
Cosmos clients by default are
That's
communicating.
my understanding, yeah. Everybody is on the same gossip network, and they just, clients get the same messages as validators.
But they are assuming partial synchrony, right?
That's right, yes. So this mechanism, correct, this mechanism doesn't work in partial synchrony.
Can you clarify the sleepy model here? That if I go to sleep and wake up, I immediately receive all the messages I missed during my sleep?
Yes. Yeah, so the sleepy model here is, so this is sleepy clients, not sleepy validators at the moment. And the idea is if you're a sleepy client and you wake up, then you receive sort of all the messages that you missed in the past. Correct. Again, this assumption comes sort of from the gossip network where everybody keeps sort of relaying stuff and you connect to other people and they will tell you sort of what you missed in the meantime.
Is that crucial for safety to receive all messages from the past? Because it seems quite of an overhead in terms of bandwidth if you keep rebroadcasting all the messages from Genesis to present. That is
crucial here for the safety, right? Because it could be that somebody sort of in the past confirmed something here. And the only thing you know is that they gossiped it, right? And if you 1 year later sort of wake up for the first time, somebody could present, like a dishonest majority could present you with a conflicting log, right? And the only thing that would stop you from outputting that log is that you know that somebody else had a conflicting log in the past. So let's talk about the always live protocol, right? So we want to build this protocol that now has a liveness resilience of 100% and a safety resilience of 49%. Here's how we're going to do it. We take transactions, and the first thing is we gossip them. We just broadcast them to everybody. We gossip them to everybody. And then we're going to run an off-the-shelf SMR protocol for 49%, say synchronous hot stuff. We're also going to maintain a queue of all the transactions we've ever seen. Okay, and we're gonna have a queue where we basically queue these transactions for delta plus the confirmation time of this protocol. Okay, and sometimes we're keeping track of like transactions that have already been in the system for a long time, right? And then we're gonna look at the transactions that are still unconfirmed, that are still pending after delta plus the confirmation time of that protocol. Okay, these are the transactions that come out of here are transactions that are that have entered the system long time ago and still for some reason haven't been confirmed, right? And since we always want to be live, we need to do something with these transactions. Right? But what does it happen? So then what do we do? Well, we're just going to put these transactions somewhere in our output log. Okay? Maybe at the end of the output log. And here's the argument why that's fine. That's fine because suppose the adversary is less than 49%. Okay, so we're gonna do a liveness proof first. Okay, let me give you the liveness argument. Okay, so suppose a transaction enters here, right? The transaction will be gossiped. Okay, good. It'll be added to that queue. After some time, it'll come out of that queue. Either by that time the transaction has been confirmed. If yes, fine, it'll be output. If no, we're just gonna put it into the output log somewhere. Okay, that's fine. So liveness is clear. How about safety? Suppose the safety we only have to provide if the adversary is less than 49%. So suppose the adversary is less than 49%, then that protocol is safe and live. Right? So every transaction that we queue for delta plus the confirmation time of that protocol will have been included in that output log because that protocol is now live under an adversary like this. Right? And so there will not be ever overdue and pending transactions. Right? There will never be transactions that have entered the system long time ago and still have not been ordered by this protocol. And so this prefixing or this injection operation basically does nothing, right? It never adds any new transactions. And so that's why the output is safe. The output log here is basically the output log there.
Could you see a little bit about transaction dissemination? Like as a user, do I send it to a validator or do I send it to a client? Do clients echo transactions they hear about back to validators?
Yeah, the assumption here is that everybody just gossips every transaction that they hear. Yeah.
You're relying on the fact that the assumption that the liveness of that inner consensus box is not just eventual.
Correct.
Right? That it's
Yep.
by some deadline.
Yep. There is a worst case confirmation latency. Yeah, that's right.
We talked about this throughput congestion, right? If there are way too many transactions, your inner consensus protocol won't be able to process them fast enough.
Yeah.
That will affect this.
That will affect
result.
this. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So here the assumption is that exactly this, right? So the assumption is there is a worst case confirmation latency on this protocol, right? And the assumption is when you drop a transaction into that protocol, since we're in a synchronous setting, there is some upper bound on how long it takes for that to be ordered, right? And Ling is pointing out, okay, that's usually derived sort of under assumptions of like, okay, the block size sort of here is infinite, right? And so as soon as there is an honest block that gets confirmed eventually, that would sort of bring in all the pending transactions, right? And so I think it's an interesting question. What happens? As long as you have that worst case confirmation, you're fine, right? But what that actually looks like for protocols in practice, I'm not aware.
Instead, if I define liveness of that inner box to just be eventual,
then this doesn't work.
Then it's not clear where the upper bound, lower bound, where
yeah,
to worry.
If all you know is that protocol eventually confirms stuff, then this construction will not work, right? Then you don't know how long you have to wait
How
here.
about the lower bound? The lower bound certainly holds, right? Because it's now just a harder problem.
Yeah.
But it's possible that you can prove even stronger lower bound.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, intuitively, you don't even know if you've ever had a liveness violation then, right?
Say again?
You don't even know if you've had a liveness violation, right? If you don't have if you're using a subroutine that's just like eventually live, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
You don't even know. At any given time, you may not have seen something because of the network, or you may not have seen something because of the 51% adversary, and you don't know which, right?
Yep.
Somewhat related question. Should I think of like pi_int as being run for some fixed duration? Or should I think of this as running forever and you're doing this periodically?
I think of it as, it's running forever. I think of this diagram as basically like one of these block diagrams that we have in electrical engineering, right? There's like all of this is streaming basically. Yeah. Okay. Good. So this sort of gives you sort of an overview of what happens at these 2 points that we've discussed before. So far, we've been looking at the synchronous setting, right, with always awake validators. And what we do in the paper is we do 2 more dimensions kind of the models that we're considering, right? One is we also include a partially synchronous setting where the network between both clients and validators could have periods of asynchrony where you don't have a delay bound capital delta. And the other one is we also consider validator sleepiness. So far we've assumed that validators are always on from the start of the protocol. And we also consider the setting where validators can sort of temporarily crash. Okay, and again, this setting is harder than this setting, and this setting is harder than that setting. And so overall, we get this 16 different models, and we characterize the achievable region for all of them. Okay. So far what we've discussed is this row here. Right? So we've talked about synchronous and always-on validator, synchronous network and always-on validators, and we've seen the sleepy silent setting is this nice diagonal. We've seen the always-on and communicating setting, which covers everything. And then we've seen these two intermediary regimes.
So could you say a sentence about the second row, third column?
Sorry, say again?
Second row, third column?
Second row, third column. Yes, I'm going to get there. Exactly. So something interesting is happening here, right? Which is that if we have sleepy validators and a synchronous setting, then somehow this always safe protocol goes away. The always live protocol still works, but the always safe protocol no longer works. Why? Sorry?
I'm also confused about the fourth column in the second row, because that's usually achieved by Dolev Strong. Right?
Yeah.
And how do you run Dolev Strong in Sleepy?
Well, you can just treat the sleepy nodes as crashed, right? As the crashed nodes as within the Byzantine budget,
Byzantine.
Right? Because the Byzantine budget is so large, you can just lump them into there. So what goes wrong here with the always safe protocol? The critical thing is this the certifiability here, right? So what we don't have in the sleepy setting is the fact that when you get an output log from this protocol, you also get a certificate that would prompt every other client to confirm that output. And so that doesn't exist in the sleepy validator setting. And it turns out that the protocol then, the problem then becomes impossible. Now let's see. Yeah, we have enough time to talk.
So if you try to run that without the certificates, so then I guess some Byzantine person gossips you something.
Exactly, and you don't know whether they're actually got that log from this protocol or whether they just made this log up and are trying to stop you from confirming things, right? Yeah, exactly. So there is an impossibility for that, right? So we can sort of argue the impossibility of this upper triangle, and primarily for sort of educational purposes, since many of you may never have seen a proof of this kind, I'm going to step through the details of that. So this is one slide, should take some 3 minutes or so, and then hopefully what you will take away is maybe not so important sort of how exactly that happens in this one result, but sort of you will see how these kind of arguments work. Okay. So we're going to assume for contradiction, we had a protocol, right, that could do something here in this red region, right? Something that's like maybe just on the boundary here, or just past the boundary, right? Some protocol pi with a safety violation in a beta that is somewhere between 0.5 and 1, right? And a liveness violation that sort of corresponds to that, sort of on that diagonal, right? And then we're going to look at like 4 different executions, right? And we're going to see sort of under the assumption that that protocol here has this liveness resilience and the safety resilience, sort of how does the protocol kind of have to behave, and that's going to lead us to a contradiction. Right? Specifically, in the first execution, we're going to consider the validators partitioned into 2 sets. Right? One are beta, and the other ones are all the other ones, 1 minus beta. Right? We're going to put the validators in Q to sleep, because we're in the sleepy setting. And we're going to input a transaction into the set P. Okay, then our honest client eventually, because the protocol is assumed to be live in this setting, right? The protocol is assumed to be live if 1 minus beta validators are corrupt, but here actually there's nobody corrupt, right? So definitely our client has to output that transaction TX, right? Execution 2 is basically the same thing but mirrored. right? There's going to be another client. Now the nodes in P are asleep. The nodes in Q are awake. The nodes in Q get transaction 2. And then our client for the same argument has to output transaction 2. And then in execution 3, there's going to be 3 clients now. The guy in the middle is asleep for a while, okay, in the beginning of the protocol. Doesn't follow the protocol yet. The client sort of on the right here, right, and the nodes in the validators in Q are going to follow the same strategy that honest parties are following in execution 2. A transaction 1 is entered into the nodes in P, right? Now this client has to output that transaction 1 eventually.
So the players in Q don't talk at all to the players in P.
Correct. Yeah, they just pretend like, you know, they're in this setting, right? They treat everybody else as asleep. And then execution 4, again, we're going to mirror the situation, right? We're going to, again, have this guy in the middle asleep. The guys in P and this client are going to mimic the behavior of the honest nodes over there. Transaction 2 enters into Q. Then this client has to eventually output transaction 2. And then after sort of these confirmations, TX1 and TX2 have sort of happened, right? The adversary nodes here, right, now start doing sort of what happened over there. Okay, and vice versa. Right? And then the question is, okay, what should this client now be outputting? Right? Because if this client outputs transaction 1 first, then you get a safety violation here. If this client outputs transaction 2 first, you get a safety violation there. But it has to output something.
Yeah, and like you say, the point is that neither of those are certifiable. Right? Yeah.
So what can we do in the setting? Right, if you want to sort of get the other bound, right, the sort of the achievability side of this, one way to do that, for example, is with this goldfish protocol, with a modification of the goldfish protocol. We haven't checked whether there's probably other protocols that can do the same. Okay.
Sorry, can you connect the dots there for a second? Like why does that solve that problem? Like what is it you need and that has?
So, good, yeah. So you know, why this protocol and not, for example, Nakamoto? Right? The most kind of canonical sleepy protocol would be Nakamoto. And the reason we can't do Nakamoto is because I need to somehow tune some sort of a quorum. Right? And so that's why sort of Nakamoto allows me to operate here at this half and half point, but it's unclear how you would get higher safety and lower liveness in a protocol like Nakamoto.
And like a synchronous hot stuff type thing?
That doesn't work for sleepy validators. Right, so we need some sort of a sleepy protocol that allows us to tune the quorum.
You want a quorum-based style protocol that works in the sleepy model.
Exactly.
And Goldfish is an example.
And Goldfish happens to be the one that I'm most familiar with. Yeah. And so there it happens to work. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and back to sort of you know, this big matrix. There's one more remark I want to make, which is if we look at the bottom 2 rows of this, right? Okay, one thing, you know, we knew this already ahead of time, is that under partial synchrony with sleepy validators, there's nothing you can do, right? And under partial synchrony with always-on validators, interestingly, what you can do does not depend on your client model, right? So the safety and liveness resilience pairs achievable are robust to the choice of client model under partial synchrony. And perhaps that gives some, you know, some plausible story for why partial synchrony is such an attractive protocol, such an attractive model to work with. Awesome. Yeah, if you guys want to know more, check out the paper for all the details, and happy to chat.
One question. So you use the word client. I almost feel like what I really want to think about are like full nodes that are just like passively tracking like updates to blockchain state or something. What do you think of, like, when you say clients, what do you have in mind?
When I say client, I mean any party that is not themselves staked or does not have hash power or is not part of sort of the, you know, whatever resource it is that we use for the threshold assumption in like among the validators. Whether it's clients as in like light clients or whether it's full nodes, I think it holds for all of those.
I think in this case, so for light clients would be actually very expensive in terms of bandwidth to be communicating.
Yeah,
so I didn't have light clients in mind when you were talking about clients, because otherwise, if they follow the entire gossiping network, that's quite one overhead.
Yes, yeah, correct, yeah.
Maybe we can consider a mixed clients model. Some clients are communicating, others are not. As full nodes and light clients are both clients in that sense.
That would be interesting. Yeah, we haven't looked at that. Yeah, we have only looked at homogeneous client populations. Yeah. I think in general, I mean, you know, my personal take is in terms of these models, I think being in the sleepy and silent setting is sort of appealing. Just because it's so simple. But you know, given that there's something to be gained from going to the sleepy and communicating setting, I think that is quite a plausible setting to be in. Most of the systems we have today, I think at least the public chains, basically give us this property anyway because they're public chains, so the network needs to be kind of accessible to everybody. I would not want to go to a client model that doesn't work with sleepy client. Like, I think the assumption on clients always being on is kind of a more restrictive and less easy to justify assumption than the communicatingness. I think communicating, but only when you happen to be awake, I think is a fine model.
Awesome. Let's thank you again.
Thank you.